beyond belief, awakening to Christ consciousness in a modern world. Have you ever felt like there's something more, something deeper than the religious doctrines we've been taught? Something that transcends the boundaries of organized faith, yet still connects us to that profound sense of the divine? I recently had the extraordinary opportunity to interview Chandra Franklin, whose revolutionary insights into Christ consciousness have transformed how thousands approach their spiritual journeys. Chandra isn't just another spiritual teacher. She's a visionary who has created ripples of awakening across communities seeking authentic connection beyond traditional religious frameworks. Her work has particularly empowered Black professionals to reclaim their spiritual authority outside institutional constraints that have historically limited rather than liberated. In a world desperate for genuine spiritual connection, Chandra stands as a beacon of truth, guiding people back to their innate divinity with grace, wisdom, and unflinching honesty. The revelation that changed everything for me during our conversation was disarmingly simple yet profoundly revolutionary. Christ consciousness isn't about religion at all. It's about awakening. Let that sink in for a moment. Christ consciousness isn't about joining the right church, memorizing scripture, or following a specific set of rules. It's about recognizing the divine nature that already exists within you. It's about awakening to your true self, a truth so simple yet so radical that it threatens the very foundations of how we've been taught to approach spirituality. When I first heard this from Chandra, I'll admit I was skeptical. Growing up surrounded by religious doctrine, the idea that spirituality could exist outside those carefully constructed boundaries seemed almost blasphemous. But as our conversation unfolded, something profound began to shift in my understanding. We've been taught to seek divinity outside ourselves, Chandra explained, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who has walked this path deeply. When the greatest spiritual teachers, including Jesus himself, pointed inward, the kingdom of heaven is within you wasn't a metaphor, it was a map. This perspective changes everything. It means that spiritual awakening isn't about finding the right teacher or joining the right community, though those can certainly help. It's about remembering who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and fear. It's about recognizing that the Christ consciousness, that state of profound love, wisdom, and oneness, isn't something foreign to your nature. It is your nature waiting to be remembered. The beauty of Christ consciousness lies in its universality. It doesn't belong to Christianity alone, it belongs to humanity. It's that state of being where compassion flows naturally, where love becomes your default response, where you recognize the divine in yourself and others without effort. But here's where many of us get stuck. We've been conditioned to believe that spiritual growth requires suffering, that enlightenment demands sacrifice, that divinity is something we must earn through perfect behavior. What if that's all backward? What if awakening to Christ consciousness is actually about removing the barriers we've placed between ourselves and our true nature, rather than adding more spiritual achievements to our resume? In the Nas.io community, a digital space where diverse participants explore spiritual awakening beyond traditional boundaries, this question has sparked hundreds of transformative conversations. I want to share with you the story of Amara, a brilliant Black woman executive who joined this community feeling spiritually homeless. Despite her success in the corporate world, she felt disconnected from her spiritual roots. I spent 20 years in a church that told me exactly how to pray, how to worship, how to be, she shared during one of their online gatherings. But my deepest spiritual experiences, moments of profound connection and love, happened outside those structures in quiet moments alone. I thought something was wrong with me. Through the NAS.io community, Amara discovered she wasn't alone. Hundreds of others, particularly Black professionals, were navigating similar tensions between their personal spiritual experiences and inherited religious framework. Through vulnerable conversations and shared practices, they began to recognize the Christ consciousness transcends denominational boundaries by focusing on direct connection with the divine. The most liberating realization, Amara explained, was understanding that my spiritual experiences weren't wrong. They were simply beyond the container designed to hold them. Christ consciousness isn't about fitting into someone else's spiritual box. It's about breaking free of all boxes to discover the limitless divine presence within. This community has created safe space particularly valuable for Black professionals and entrepreneurs seeking authentic spiritual growth outside institutional constraints. Many report increased self awareness, deeper compassion for others, and a profound sense of unity that extends beyond religious labels. They're discovering that the path to Christ consciousness emphasizes personal transformation and inner experience rather than adherence to rigid rules or institutional practices. Loner Wolf, another platform focused on mystical spirituality, demonstrates this approach beautifully. Here, readers discuss their journeys towards self realization using concepts like oneness alongside Christ consciousness. Many struggle with integrating mystical experiences into modern life while facing skepticism from traditional faith communities. I was particularly moved by Marcus's story, a former minister who found himself increasingly alienated from his own tradition as his spiritual experiences deepened. I reached a point where the words I was preaching on Sunday felt hollow compared to the wordless knowing I experienced in meditation. He shared in the Loner Wolf Forum, but I had no language for what was happening to me until I discovered the concept of Christ consciousness. By emphasizing direct experience over doctrine, let this mind be in you, which was also in Jesus. Loner Wolf encouraged readers like Marcus to seek inner transformation through meditation, reflection, and service. The results speak for themselves. Individuals report breakthroughs in self acceptance, reduced ego driven behavior, and increased empathy towards others. This approach has proven particularly resonant among Black women seeking empowerment through faith without exclusionary structures. The platform has built an engaged forum where thousands share stories about awakening their sacred heart, the core essence described as Christ. But what does this look like in practice? How do we move from intellectual understanding to lived experience? The Balanced Souls Collective offers one compelling model through their social media outreach. Using Instagram to reach primarily young adults, especially women of color, including many African American voices, they share messages centered on awakening divine memory rather than religion when discussing Christ consciousness. Zara, one of their founding members, explained their approach. We're not interested in creating more spiritual rules. We're interested in helping people remember who they already are. Christ consciousness isn't something new you need to become, it's your original nature beneath all the forgetting. They face significant challenges, overcoming stigma associated with non traditional spirituality and building trust in an often noisy digital landscape. Their solution involves regular inspirational content emphasizing practical steps, daily mindfulness, meditation, journaling, and affirmations designed to foster connection with one's higher self and collective humanity. Their impact extends beyond individual transformation. They've helped normalize conversations around inner divinity among audiences who might otherwise hesitate to explore such topics publicly due to cultural pressures or fear of judgment, thus expanding possibilities for what it means to live authentically and fully awake in the world today. As Chandra Franklin emphasized in our interview, Christ consciousness isn't something you achieve through perfect behavior. It's something you remember through presence, through stillness, through letting go of who you think you should be and embracing who you truly are. This remembering often happens in moments of profound stillness. When we quiet the noise of shoulds and musts and allow ourselves to simply be, something shifts. The boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. The critical inner voice softens. We touch, if only briefly, that state of consciousness where love flows without effort and wisdom arises naturally. But here's the challenge: our modern world rarely values stillness. We're rewarded for doing, achieving, producing, not for being. We measure our worth by our output, not by our presence. We prioritize external validation over internal knowing. Christ consciousness invites us to reverse these priorities, to value being over doing, to trust inner knowing over external validation, to recognize that our worth isn't earned through achievement, but is inherent in our very existence. This shift isn't easy. It requires courage to question the foundations of belief systems we may have held our entire lives. It demands vulnerability to admit that perhaps we don't have all the answers. It calls for patience as we unlearn patterns of thinking and being that no longer serve us. But the rewards are immeasurable. When we awaken to Christ consciousness, to our true nature beyond ego identification, we discover a wellspring of love, wisdom, and creativity that has been within us all along. We find ourselves naturally extending compassion, not just to those who are easy to love, but to everyone, including ourselves. So I stand before you today with a challenge that might just change everything. What if for just 1 week you approach your life as if the divine wasn't something to seek, but something to remember? What if you treated each person you encountered, including yourself, as an expression of that divine consciousness? What if you began each day with 5 minutes of stillness, simply being present with the truth of who you are beneath all the roles and expectations? This isn't about adopting new beliefs. It's about questioning the limitations we've placed on our spiritual nature. It's about remembering what we've always been beneath the forgetting. The world doesn't need more people striving to be spiritual. It needs more people awakening to the spirituality that already flows through them. It needs more people living from Christ consciousness, that state of love, wisdom, and oneness that transforms not through force or fear, but through remembrance. The revolution we've been waiting for isn't out there, it's in here, in the quiet center of your being where Christ consciousness has always resided, waiting patiently for you to remember. The question isn't whether you're worthy of this awakening. The question is, are you ready to remember who you've always been?